Hi, and a very warm welcome to the very first episode of Needl's new knowledge series, The Right Signal. We at Needl.ai believe in a world drowning in noise. It is important to identify and amplify the right signal. For this, we need to be equipped with the proper knowledge and the right tools. Thus, the inception of this knowledge series by Needl.ai is aimed at helping you get the best of both. All right, let's get starting. So today's discussion will focus on everything related to the electric vehicle landscape. We have investors here, business owners, I can see, and tech entrepreneurs, and a lot of questions on today's topic, but we have shortlisted to us the most important aspects on EV. We have a full 60 minutes and two incredible experts in their respective field to help us address those questions. In fact, Needl.ai's very own founder, Kuntal Shah, who brings over 3 decades of experience in value investing, will be in conversation with Ravin Mirchandani, an expert and pioneer in the EV mobility sector. He's the CEO of Ador Digatron and co-founder of AccuSenses, an Australian-based company focusing on sustainable carbon-free driving and road safety. He's also the host of the podcast Energizing India, in which he speaks to major influencers of e-mobility in India to uncover the roadblocks that hamper rapid growth in this sector. So, hi guys, thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
Great. Should we start?
Yep.
Right. Okay. So, Ravin, let's start with you. For anyone interested in buying an EV in the near future, what are the key driving considerations and why should I go for an EV given the current cost structure and return on investment?
That's a good question, Steph. And I think the answer to this question needs to be nuanced a bit. It depends on which part of the world you're asking that question. For example, if you were to ask that question in Europe, there is an incredible amount of availability and infrastructure already that exists. There's a lot of vehicle products that are available for you to buy, and there's price points that can match every budget. Similarly in the US. In fact, in the US, it goes even a step further because you can even get 4-wheel drives or pickup trucks, which you drive in the in the Midwest, and you'd get them at the right price point. In India, the situation is slightly different. Today, there's only 4 vehicles, electric vehicles available, and the charging infrastructure is only just being rolled out. So the answer to that question in India would be, is this the right time to be buying a car? I'd say I want to buy a car, but I have resisted in buying an electric car because what I want isn't available. The range isn't available, the price point isn't available, and the infrastructure isn't available. What will change by 2024, however, is an inflection point. 2024 is when the first of the 3 gigafactories to manufacture lithium cells will come on stream in Gujarat, followed by the other 2 investments that have been made. So battery prices will drop, battery availability will increase. There's a plethora of new models that are coming onto the market in 2023. You'll have various price points with Mercedes above 1 crore or 10 million rupees. You'll have the Volvos, the MGs available, or the Volvos at half that price, and then at the bottom end of the scale, you'll have many Tata and MG vehicles that will be available for the common Indian to drive as well. So availability of models next year, price points for the battery the year after, and in the meantime, we're already seeing 1,000 kilometers electrified with fast chargers in India this very year in 2022, and you should get to about 10,000 kilometers by the end of this year. So 2024, you should have 30 or 35,000 kilometers electrified. When is the right time to buy? If in Europe, now. If you're in India, wait a year and a half.
Right. Take notes, folks. Thank you so much. Kuntal, so every long-term trend has a shorter boom-bust cycle along the way. So where are we currently in the EV charging cycle, according to you?
So Steph, the role of prediction markets in this kind of an environment, which is dynamic and fast-moving, is full of error-prone, but let me hazard some guess. So if you see the history of humanity, it has been about cycles. We have gone through steam cycle, we have gone through railways, we have gone through cars, we've gone through internet, and each would have overshoot both on the business front as well as in the financial cycle. And to that extent, I don't see this cycle petering out in any different manner. In fact, it might be of interest to the users to know that in early 1920s, when Edison was alive, he used to drive an electric car and so did his wife. But on onset of cheaper and faster factory scale production at Henry Ford and fuel vehicle ensured that electric vehicle didn't take off. Obviously, technology also was not there in terms of electronics and so forth. So technology is the underlying driver force, and the cost curves are the big determinant of the adoption at the user level. And these two are moving in multiple directions right now. You have range of batteries, you have range of fuel technologies. It's not just EV, fuel cell could also begin in the long haulage stuff. So yeah, the cycles will get amplified, the financial cycles. Market will overshoot and undershoot on both the front. That's expected. But directionally, it's very clear that we are going to move away from fossil fuel, which is normal coal, gas, and oil, towards more better mix of market, because batteries are now available, which can store diverse kind of electricity and then discharge at the right point of time. So yeah, the whole point is directionally we are moving away from fossil fuel towards electrical and non-fossil fuel led transportation system, and this would impact multiple industries. It would impact transport, it would impact energy, it would impact oil and gas, it would impact even the manufacturing and materials. So if lightweight plastics were to be discovered, they would be applied in your luggage also. So there's a massive disruption which is happening, and there will be winners and losers, just like we had in past.
If I could just add to that, in fact, the anecdote that Kuntal mentioned, Steph, the difference in 1914 or 1913, when you had EVs available, in fact, Ford had first launched an EV, Henry Ford, and then moved away to an ICE engine. The difference was that an EV was available at $1,400, and Henry Ford was able to launch his Model T in an ICE variant at $700. So it instantly became a lot more efficient to buy an ICE engine. And the reason the people adopted it was because you no longer needed to go in front of the vehicle and crankshaft it, because the technology to crank an engine with a lead acid battery came available just about at that time. So it was the standardization of the ICE manufacturing production line that reduced the cost. And the same thing now will happen in electric vehicles, because the ecosystem is slowly coming about, right? It's driven by China right now, but there is a tremendous amount of investment in Europe, and you will find the same wave that happened 110 years ago in ICE technology will happen in EVs. The second point I want to make, just to again underline what Kuntal said, I reckon that in 10 years, when you drive into a fuel station, particularly in Europe, maybe in 20 years in India, a fuel station will be a molecule agnostic energy center. You'll be able to buy a petrol molecule, a diesel molecule, a CNG molecule, an LNG molecule, and even a hydrogen molecule, maybe in liquid format or gaseous in high pressure, and eventually also charge your car or swap your battery. And other molecules might become available over time as well. So we are moving to a very different world, and you will be buying a vehicle, coming back to your first question, Steph, you'll be buying a vehicle based on your need. Today, you buy a vehicle based on what is your 100% requirement. Well, once a year, I want to drive to Greece, or I want to drive to Goa, but 99% of the time I'm doing 20 kilometers a day. That won't be the case anymore. You'll buy a vehicle for your 95% need, and you might rent a vehicle for your 5% need. And therefore, the molecule that you choose for energy will be based on your 95% need.
Well said.
Mm.
That's a great point, and I can see that in Germany happening here on a buying decision. Just to connect with what you said about R&D and standardization, what do you think, Ravin, is required to scale EV adoption today?
You might need to nuance that question a little bit more for me, Steph. What is needed to facilitate EV production? Is that the focus of your question?
Yeah, basically, what is the research and development that is still required to scale EV to a different level? I
think that the answer to that question comes beyond research and development. It even ranges to policy, to regulatory decisions. You need policies that foster electric vehicles, for example, that allow people to have the courage to make the R&D investments. So, for example, if the Indian government were to come out and say, in the next 3 years, all buses intra-city in India will need to turn to electric, that will give the Indian bus manufacturers, Tata, Ashok Leyland, and even the recent entries from China, BYD, for example, the impetus they need to spend the millions of dollars in research and development to reduce the price of an EV bus. You wouldn't do that today because you don't know where the policy and the regulatory direction is. The cost of the battery, for example, as Kuntal was mentioning, at the turn of the century, a lithium battery costed something like $800 a kilowatt hour, and that's dropped to $130 today, and it drops about 22% every 2 years. So you need policy again and regulatory impetus to manufacture batteries in India, to manufacture cells in India, not just cell packing. And then it's the whole EV ecosystem. Today, where do you buy your drivetrain from? You have the opportunity to go to China, which is what all of India is doing, or you have the opportunity to go to Germany and buy from Robert Bosch or one of these companies, right? How do you create that ecosystem in India? Again, it's policy driven so that you're not reliant on overseas impetus to sustain your EV chain in India. So the research and development has to go into all sections, but that money is not being spent today because there isn't a courage to do it. And there isn't a courage to do it because up till now, there wasn't a very clear policy direction. I would like to see governments come out and make a very clear statement that says, this is our cutoff year beyond which we will not accommodate hydrocarbon-based fuel vehicles being sold as new vehicles. And then you'll find that the entire industry gets behind it, right? And that takes a little bit of courage. Some countries have it and others are waiting to catch up.
Right, thank you. And we get back to the government and the policy changes that are required later here. Kuntal, when we look at batteries, so today in many Asian countries, 2- and 3-wheeler predominantly are used for transport. So one needs to replace batteries every 40,000 kilometers, sometimes even faster because of non-reliable or low-tech batteries. Do you feel customers are ready for this? And what would be the resale value given this battery change? And also, if you look at financing, how would that work?
Okay, let me ask the last question first because it's easier to answer. Most of the financing for 2-wheeler and 3-wheeler even right now is based on the credibility of the person who's applying for the loan and not the underlying technology, whether he's driving a CNG or a diesel or something. So it's purely based on the ability to repay. Underlying collateral value is very hard to repossess and think this thing off. And I think so it's purely agnostic to the technology, though the insurance value might differ. And the science behind that is still evolving as I speak to the insurance company. Coming back to the 2-wheeler and 3-wheeler issue. So if you see territory, Europe and US predominantly rely on 4-wheel drive. And Asia in particular, like Vietnam, Thailand, China to some extent, we have bulk of transportation also happening on 2-wheelers. And if you see the problem statement for both are totally different. Current batteries are able to give a sufficient range for lightweight 2-wheeler drives. But as you increase the size and the weight, the batteries required to drive them become bigger and bigger, and obviously they become more expensive. So there is a clear cost curve related advantage in 2-wheeler to adapt and move fast. So if you see the entire chain of the range of transportation options we have, ranging from 2-wheelers to long haul trailers, I think so this lower end segment is ripe for disruption right now. And if you see in China, already almost 49% of the installed population is now electric vehicle. And I think so they become net exporters also. I see the same thing happening in India. And there are many approaches to it. Some OEMs will decide on the batteries which are small, which can be taken out, can be taken to your home or office and can be charged in the plug point. They just require 5, 6, 7 kilowatt hours and manageable to charge in few hours while you are at work or home. Or, swappable batteries where, you can just pick up the battery and swap. That requires standardization. Or you will have even the fast chargers coming, which really charges this kind of battery. In fact, there's talk of solid state batteries also. So there are many paths to nirvana here, and one of them, or many of them, will coexist at some amount of time, before which the cost curve and the customer adoption will decide the winner of who takes it all. So coming back to the replacement, I think so the kind of battery you use matter. If you are using cheap, great work, they will have shorter charging cycles available. And obviously the resale value will be very poor at the end of the charge, because 40 to 50% of the cost of the vehicle would be the battery. And if you had to change it, obviously the value will drop significantly. And I think so buyer would be aware of it at the other end. And this is evolving as of right now, as we speak.
So just to add to that point, Kuntal, Steph mentioned that we have the podcast, and one of the benefits we have on the podcast is to interview a lot of the movers and shakers of the industry in India. And we always ask the question, what is the most important element of the domino or the value chain that needs to be addressed in 2022 for faster adoption? And the one repeated answer we've got is educate the finance industry, because we are at the point where people need car loans, people need scooter loans, and startups need to be funded. And there is a resistance within the finance industry because of the question of what is the resale value, what is the life of the batteries, what happens after that, what is the second life, what is the technology that's going to be implemented, and are they betting on the wrong horse? And so clearly, this is the year where we need to do whatever we can to help the finance industry get their heads around the question of EVs and help them make the big decisions to facilitate the growth in this industry.
Well, I have something to add here that if you see the organized legacy ICE engine guys, they are seeing shrinkage in volumes. Prior to COVID, they were selling something like 2 crore or 20 million vehicles units. Now they are at 1.4 crore or like 14 million. And if you see in the hinterland, a lot of Chinese and other imports vehicles which are low speed, they don't require registration. There's no quality criteria required. They are booming and financiers are still funding them. So I don't think so. Availability of finance is going to be the issue. Insurance is going to be the bottleneck. But it's evolving. But basically most of the financing happens on the credibility of the borrower, not on the underlying security.
Right. And speaking of batteries, what are the challenges when it comes to disposal of batteries, and what is the impact on the environment?
Who's the question
who should answer?
Who feels like it? I feel like Ravin, but whatever, whoever
okay,
wants
I
to
can
go.
With that, and then Kuntal can follow, Steph. You know, it is often said that the biggest lithium mines in India are in the top drawers of people's offices or office tables. It's because that's where you keep your old phones and that's where you keep your old laptops. And there's a lot of lithium available in people's houses that they don't know what to do with. The second problem we have in the developing world, and I would say all of developing Asia and Africa is kind of in that segment, is when you throw it into your what the Americans would call the waste paper basket, it goes into landfill, and from landfill it's then cherry picked or harvested by unskilled people, taken to an unskilled factory that then is doing leaching of all of these minerals in a very dangerous format. That's what's happening today. Again, no policy, no regulatory direction, because nobody has identified that this is an issue. So you've got dangerous chemicals being leached into rivers and into landfill. The other problem you have in the developing economies, the moment this becomes a possible business revenue cycle, the mafia gets involved, because it's waste. Waste is mafia. And so no legitimate business enterprise is going to get involved, because you're going to have all sorts of problems from the mafia. Unless you have policy direction that says this is going to be an organized industry, we will take 4 factories in the country and all the lithium will go there, and the seller of the phone is then responsible for taking it back from you, like you have in Germany, and delivering it to the recycling industry. Second life, I know you want to say something. Second life is going to be very important for the lithium industry. If I was a betting man, I'd say if there was a second life opportunity in terms of technology as well as a capacity that's being built, I would be investing in that, because that's clearly something that's going to be very important in the next 7 or 8 years. Kuntal.
Yeah, I think so. Recycling is going to be reality, because partly it will be mandated by regulation. And thanks, you brought up the mafia. If you see earlier, waste management in US was run by all the mafia gangs, but now you have listed companies like Waste Management running the show. It's going to evolve just with the time, but yeah, I think so. We will soon have a very large listed recycling business, because Ravin, when I analyze the economics of it, as the demand of, like, say, nickel is going to go up for like 18x over a decade. So obviously the price points are going to move up, and then there is a black mass. I think so. Typical cost of conversion are like $90, but you could extract in theory $800 worth of stuff: aluminium, nickel, cobalt, blah blah blah. There is a manpower cost involved, and there's regulatory push required. But I'm optimistic of recycling picking off because of environmental issue and the fact that all these minerals are finite. The worst point is also 300 million lithium ion batteries are used in US alone, and they throw it away. It makes sense to recycle because US doesn't have lithium reserves. They are somewhere else. So where the minerals get mined, where they get processed, and where they get used are 3 different geographies. And I think so we are moving more towards self-reliant economies, and I think so recycling is.
So if I were to sum up, you're basically saying that you agree with me, which is if there was a second life investment opportunity, we should be putting money in it.
Definitely.
Take notes again. All right. So I'm saying it right straight off. Ravin, this one is for you. So in the last 2 years, we have seen several breakthroughs in hydrogen ecosystems. So how does this impact adoption of fuel cell technology as an alternative to battery-based technology?
Very good question, Seth. And I'll go back to an answer I gave you a short while ago to say in 7 or 8 years, when you drive to a fuel station, you will be deciding what molecule you want to fill into your vehicle. If you are going to be driving within a city and your drive to work and back is 30 kilometers, you'll buy a battery electric vehicle because it will be the cheapest. If you're a fleet, a taxi or a city bus company or a long distance truck company, or you're driving 70, 80 kilometers just to get to work and turn around and doing the same amount come back, you likely make a decision to move to hydrogen. A hydrogen vehicle is an electric vehicle. It's no different, but you use 90% less lithium in the vehicle. And instead you have a high pressure hydrogen tank, which then converts the hydrogen converts into electricity using a fuel cell. So you're charging the lithium battery on board rather than storing a significant amount of energy on board to give you the distance. What's going to happen over the next few years is the rare earths that are used both for electrolyzing water to make hydrogen, as well as converting hydrogen back to electricity using fuel cells, all of which require titanium, platinum, and all sorts of other rare earths available in very few countries, often unstable. As the R&D proves that you can use other minerals and rare earths, or not rare earths in this case, as electrodes to convert hydrogen to electricity or water into hydrogen, you'll find price goes down, availability goes up, and people will start naturally adopting hydrogen. In Europe, 4 years ago, you had 2 or 3 hydrogen fuel stations, and then 4 companies came together, Air Liquide, Linde, and 2 oil companies came together to create a joint venture to install hydrogen pumps at every one of the highway fuel stations of the 2 oil companies that were in the joint venture. Today, you have over 200, and I'm talking in just 1,000 days, right? You have 200 filling stations for hydrogen. That clearly shows you when an industry gets behind policy, or when an industry can see the writing on the wall, things change very quickly. I don't see there as a safety risk in hydrogen. I think, in fact, it's a lot safer to drive a hydrogen vehicle than an electric or an ICE vehicle. So you will find that the same resistance that we had to EVs in 2018, 2019 is what you have for hydrogen today. And if we have this discussion in 24 or 2025, again, it'll be the natural choice people will be making.
Well, Ravin, I have some data to back it up. So I was reading IEA report. In mid-2021, there was something like 300 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity on stream. But if you see right now, in next 10 years, by 2030, is going to go up 180x to 54 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity, and 30 more are planned, which will bring it to 280. More capacity means your cost per kg will fall from around $7, $7.50 to $2, at which the fuel parity comes. And as you know, hydrogen packs more joules per kg, and if you could use it, and by the way, one important thing, hydrogen is versatile. It can be used in refining, it can be used in fertilizer, it could be used in many chemicals. I think so hydrogen is something you would not write off. And also please remember that hydrogen based companies are highly profitable. They have the cash flows, unlike EV vehicles which may be burning, because they manufacture so many gases apart from hydrogen, and within 200 kilometers they sell. So they are almost like natural oligopoly or monopolies. So there's the cash flows to pull it off, provided the investments happen.
The difference, though, Kuntal, is that if you see the people who are investing in hydrogen today, it's not the legacy companies. The legacy companies are catching up now, right? Linde, Air Liquide, they're catching up now. They were busy with Corona, with oxygen. The ones who are investing in electrolyzing capacity are little startups. They're Inapter, McPhee, they're larger companies like Plug Power, Hydrogenics. You're seeing, the largest is Cummins, that came in and realized that diesel has got a cliff, so to speak, and therefore is now investing in hydrogen as an energy source for backup. It's classic. It's exactly what happened with the electric vehicle industry. You had Tesla that came about. In this industry, you've got the startups that are shaking it all up. And putting in the capacity. And it's incredibly exciting to see them get the funding to change the world. And recently, even Reliance announced that they want to commit $75 billion in India to create not just the lithium battery capacity, but also the electrolyzer and the fuel cell capability. So again, having this discussion in 2026 or 2027, the flavor and the color of what we're saying, very different from today. And that, these are the mega trends that are just starting now in terms of investment.
Ravin, well said. In fact, I was just going to say, refiners have dealt with hydrogen all their lives. They understand the molecule and they have the wherewithal to produce it also. And a lot of startups are working on the technology, ITM, and all of them in Europe. Yep, that's going to happen.
Right, just on the buzzword startups, we can see that a large amount of capital is flowing from shareholders to new age startups, Kuntal. They follow differential models, technological skill sets, and approach to market. So, in your view, what is the capital market of the ongoing decarbonization and electrification of mobility?
Unfortunately, Steffi, the work of stock markets and the capital markets is very hard because all the knowledge is of the past, but we have to make decisions about future. And there is an undershoot and overshoot which happens all the time. Markets get excited, they get pessimistic, and the bouts of periodic buying and selling happens. But if you see, the verdict of the market has been bloodless. If you see, market cap of Tesla is more than the market cap of all the three largest manufacturers who are making multiple X of the number of the vehicles in all the three continents put together. If you see the market cap of CATL, which is manufacturing the batteries, it's the first largest listed company in China. So Linde suddenly from, in 2 years, it's moved up from $30 billion to $160 billion market cap. So if you look at the market cap trend, obviously the verdict is out that the alternative fuels technologies which will replace the fossil fuels are going to win the battle. But the journey is not going to be very linear. You will have ups and downs is what the clearly, and obviously within that, there's obviously many of the subcomponent system providers, like, people manufacturing electrolytes, people manufacturing sensors, people manufacturing battery key components like anode, cathode, they will, I think so, be far number of smaller than competition. So obviously they will capture larger part of the value addition. Ravin would have something.
I'd add something from a cultural perspective, Kuntal, and that is, you look at why Tesla came about, you look at why Nikola came about, and why, therefore, in Aptar, McPhee, and these young, thrilling startups are getting funded, including Kempower and Nel in electric vehicles and hydrogen. It's because big companies build a culture, and the culture is one that says, don't make mistakes. If you make mistakes, you're going to lose your job. And when you do that, you are not going to take risks. Entrepreneurial risk is where the big changes happen, right? The inflection in any kind of innovation happens when you have a culture that rewards risks. General Motors didn't, Ford didn't, Toyota didn't. That's the reason Nikola, Tesla, and Rivian came about. And that's the reason in Aptar, McPhee, Nel, Kempower are being funded as well, or Tritium being funded. And these didn't come about from Siemens and ABB, the big innovations in electric vehicle charging. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And therefore, you are finding that the money is going to the startups that have the culture to be able to execute on the strategy. Clear and simple.
Spoken like an entrepreneur.
Yeah, clear and simple. When we talk about making money, but how will those charging companies make money, according to you?
So, Steffi, I don't think so it's going to be any different this time. If you see, I see it as involved. There's a set of companies which manufacture components which get assembled by OEM, which in turn sell to the customer. And then there is a refining, there is a oil and gas industry which produces fuel and is transported to the station. In EV and hydrogen case, hydrogen obviously will require to be transported, like Ravin said earlier, but grid is already there. Though grid ratings will need it to be upgraded if it has to suddenly move to a large scale of EV adoption. So this time it's the same thing that people are building either the front customer sending end, or they are trying to flip it to some utilities at later on. So ultimately, yeah, there is going to be an energy company at the back end and a front end distributing company which will be in touch with the final direct consumer. Obviously, initially phase, you will require three-way cross subsidization. Customer will have to shell out higher price per unit of kilowatt hour consumed. Government will have to subsidize the initial adoption both of the vehicle as well as the charging infrastructure to get it going and kickstart the whole declining cost curve which Ravin mentioned about. Because till the time the industry doesn't get a signal they want to invest, and if they don't invest, the price points don't fall. It is the cost curves which determines the adoption once the technology feasibility is proven. That's the way I look at it.
In terms of the question that said, how do they make money? You could ask that question to any industry. How did Indigo make money? Indigo Airlines, the biggest airline in India by far. Well, they had
buying and selling aircraft.
Yeah, sale and lease back, right? They bought early, sold late, and leased back the aircraft. The money wasn't from the operations. How's Amazon making money? How's Flipkart making money? How's Zomato making money, right? You pick an industry, that question is not asked because you know clearly they're going for size. And when you look at electric vehicle charging, that is the question today. How fast are you actually onboarding customers? How good are you at retaining customers? And how resilient is the infrastructure you're putting in to make sure those customers don't leave you? Because the growth right now is about adding mileage, adding infrastructure. And eventually the big companies, the ones who make electricity and distribute electricity, will want to get involved. And then this just becomes another distribution outlet for them, which is when the question is valid. How are they going to be making money? And that will impact, then that'll impact the price of the charge, which is not something people talk about today.
So Ravin is saying build and they will come. So gain market share and money will follow. That's a hope right now.
Key takeaway. All right. Yeah. And we see a lot of changes in the technology. They will profoundly impact the transportation industry, energy and oil and gas, the material industry. So Ravin, what are the likely trends you see for the coming decade?
Oh, I think that's a very simple question. We are on the start of a mega trend, both for electric vehicles as well as for hydrogen. And anything to do with either of these, whether it's a company that is researching how to make electrolyzers cheaper, how to make fuel cells cheaper, how to make a battery cheaper. For example, how to not use lithium ion in a battery. You saw recently that Faradion, the UK company that does sodium ion batteries, was bought by Reliance for a nice tidy sum. And sodium ion batteries work really well because you don't need lithium and you don't need some of the rare earths from unstable economies. The problem with sodium is it works for slow and it works for long. So it works on a truck and it works on a rickshaw, but it's not going to give you the sort of torque that you want in high speed in your car. So there's anything to do with electric vehicles, changing the chemistry of a battery, making a car more efficient. These are all mega trends that we're seeing today. And it's spectacubut some will fall by the wayside, as it always happens. Some technologies might not work. Solid state battery needs to prove itself. But right now we're in a once in a generation kind of mega trend that is evident to everybody. My bigger fear isn't identify the trend. My bigger fear is an Enron happening where you back the wrong horse and then suddenly you have this bubble that's created and it bursts and then everybody runs away from the EV industry or the hydrogen industry, and then young startups that have amazing ideas. For example, Exponent Energy in Bangalore that's coming up with an ability to fast charge vehicles in 5 minutes. Nobody's thought of that in the world. How do these people get funded if a bubble gets burst because somebody did something stupid and overpromised to the market and completely underdelivered? And you're already seeing that across, particularly in India, you're seeing that already.
Okay, I'm not gonna ask to name us, but okay, we will be on the outlook on that. Kuntal, we spoke in the beginning a little bit. We touched upon the government's role in this, but how will the government compensate revenue shortfall from declining oil and gas consumption while subsidizing at the same time EV?
Very simple answer, Steph. Switching costs for government to change the taxation methodology is very easy. One bureaucrat sitting somewhere will draft new regulation. There will be separate metering, separate tariffs. It's easy. I think so. It's said there's no escape from death and taxes. So I think so. Government tax revenues are going to be protected in some way or other. It's evolving. Right now, they are in a giving mode. They are subsidizing. They are giving subsidies. But they will give it with one hand, and once it matures, they'll take it multi-fold back. That I'm very pretty sure of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to add an anecdote here, Kuntal. I moved back to India just about the time that smoking was banned in public places. And, I moved back in March, and on the 1st of April, smoking was going to be banned. And I sniggered. I was like, how are we going to do that with 1 billion people? It'll just happen. And guess what? On the 1st of April, nobody was smoking in buildings, in pubs, in restaurants. It was all outside. It just happened because the government had the will to do it. And I think electrification is the same. If the government has the will to do it, you can set a deadline and it will happen. India has demonstrated over and over again. The world has demonstrated over and over again. If you have a clear policy, everyone falls behind it and makes it happen. So part of it is taxation, part of it is SOPs, but part of it is also just saying, we will make it happen.
If we can put all our currency circulation out on overnight and we can still survive, we can pretty much do anything. It's just the willpower.
Right. Better happen by 2024, right?
Faster
That's the
better,
magic,
I think so.
Magic number. All right. So this is a question that I would like to to the both of you. So how vulnerable are supply chains given material and processing is concentrated in a few countries, and oil is at last widely available and can be de-risked in terms of sourcing? So what is your say on
good
that?
question? And again, the thing about this industry stuff is you have to nuance the question. So, if the question is about batteries, wow, you're incredibly reliable on China, on Africa, on Australia, on South America. And as Kuntal said, these materials are available in these countries, but they're processed in China. So you're first reliant on South America or Africa to give you the material, then you're reliant on China to process the material and then to bring it out. And we've seen clearly supply chains break down because of the repeated lockdowns in China, because of the container crisis in California. So there is an extreme reliance on supply chain. For example, we booked a car in our office on Skoda, and we've been told that, you've got no hope in getting it in 12 months because they're reliant on too many things happening around the world for us to be able to get the car delivered. So that question is clearly answered. We are heavily dependent as a globalized world. What I'm excited about, though, is that all of those consultants who used to take a lot of money from us to teach us how to make a lean supply chain are now going to take a lot of money from us to tell us how to de-lean the supply chain, de-lever ourselves from China, and how you should have multiple units that are going to be producing things to be able to take away this risk. What does that mean? Clearly, everybody on this webinar knows it means India is going to benefit. It means that people are necessarily going to say, if I buy from China, I also want to buy from somewhere else. And if we've got the right government policies, that somewhere else will not be Vietnam or Indonesia, it'll be India. I haven't seen that happen yet, but we are at the right place at the right time. And hopefully we will not steal defeat from the jaws of victory and capitalize on this moment that has been given to us by the universe and make India the hub that we've always wanted it to be for the automotive industry.
Well said, Ravin. I just have one thing to add to here is that right now, the customers, OEMs, governments, everybody is open to change in supply chain. Earlier, there was a mindset, German X quality, X price, China, Y quality, Z price. Now everything is up in the air. Whoever delivers better product, whoever delivers at better price point, whoever delivers and satisfies customers' need is going to win. The field is opened up suddenly for Indian consumers. So if you are suddenly a customer who can fulfill global yardsticks, I think that you could emerge winners. So I think that it's very advantageous for Indian OEMs who have demonstrated track record of giving right products to really scale at global level, because I think so the willingness to experiment with the supply chain is in place right now. It's almost given right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long time since the world has been open to products from anything beyond Europe or China.
We have a friend here in Pune who's supplying fasteners to Tesla.
Exactly. Yes. So fasteners from Pune to Tesla, and that's happened just through lockdown.
And I think so. If you had asked me 3-4 years back, would not have been possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Electric chargers being made in India to be supplied in Germany and the US.
Ravin is going to ship out large number of fast chargers to Europe and Australia, and which country is sitting out of Pune around beautiful surroundings where I am.
The opportunities for us to lose, I think this is one time we have where we can get it together and find that India becomes the hub for a particular segment of the automotive industry.
Would be great, but if you look at the stressful areas evolving around supply chain and ecosystem governing fossil fuel based transportation systems, sorry, German here, where do you see that? Where do you see those stressful areas?
I think so. There are stresses at almost entire supply chain, right from minerals, where a few mines, if they're shut down, would impact the global supply delivery. So to some extent, there is a predatory pricing and long-term contracts are being signed for long-term supplies. In fact, Musk had gone on record on saying anybody supplying nickel is ready to go into a long dated cycle. So I think so resource cornering is one thing. Secondly is obviously, denial of access, could be one thing. Non-interoperability of standards could be another issue, because it would fragment away the supply and economies of scale and network economics. So yeah, there are many stress points when such a large mega change which is impacting multiple industries is going to happen. There are going to be violent forces at interplay. So stress is given. The issue is the cost curves are declining very rapidly. If you see it in solar, if you see it in renewable, and I don't think so it's going to be anything different out here. We will overcome, because the collective will is to move away from three fossil fuels which are supplying almost 80% of the global energy needs. We can't sustain this. That's very clear across the board, I think so.
I think, Kuntal, that the same argument on stresses in supply chain work not just for the EV industry, but also for oil. You've seen with the attack of Russia on Ukraine that suddenly you have an oil crisis, and everyone's scrambling to see where to get the oil. Germany's wondering about gas for winter. So the same stress points work in either supply chain. What's different, however, is what hydrogen allows is for us to delever ourselves from the tyranny of the hydrocarbon molecule. We don't have to be involved in the geopolitical mess that we've had to tangle with for the last 60 years in trying to get access to our oil, because anybody can make hydrogen. I laugh at hydrogen export strategies because actually you need the sun and the wind, and you can make hydrogen yourself to fill into your vehicle, as has been aptly demonstrated at 3 locations in Sweden by a little company called Nielsen Energy, who are taking solar energy in 200 days of rain a year and converting it into hydrogen to fill into vehicles in the small town of Mariehamn in central Sweden. So hydrogen, when it becomes economical, will allow us to delever from the stresses of the, or as I call the tyranny of the hydrocarbon molecule. And I think the fact that that is possible will mean that policy will drive that, and industry will have the courage to invest in it. And so we will delever from one supply chain stress. We'll end up in another supply chain stress, but that's the reality of the next 20 years. Supply chain stress is going to be what's going to keep us full of oxygen molecules in our head, worrying with the stress of where the next fill is going to come from.
Always on toes.
That's a byproduct. Okay. Regarding Kuntal, when it comes to all the investors out there, will investors make good enough returns given constant changes that we see in technology, in the economics, and shifting consumer preferences? And which are the subsegments of the entire value chain which has potential to reward shareholders according to you?
So if you really look at the history, automotive sector has been one of the largest capex driven sector. And if you believe the word of insider, in 2015, CEO of Fiat had given a famous presentation and interview titled Confession of a Capital Junkie, where he clearly went on record giving the data of previous decades that over a life cycle, the industry has not returned adequate returns to the investor. And he had proposed consolidation as an outcome. But look at fast forward today, instead of consolidated, market is more fragmented with new startups, new age startups like Tesla and BYD and so on and so forth coming in. So that's not happening. So all hype apart, industry as an aggregate is going to destroy capital. That I'm very clear. But there will be obviously few industry leaders happening, like you've seen in CATL, you've seen in Tesla. Tesla is right now 16% of the luxury car sales in US, which was unthinkable. That given the German and the Japanese lead, they had hundreds of years of brand. Even Mercedes and BMWs and Audis are not able to cope up with Tesla in US market, at least at this stage. So to answer your question, very I don't know, but yeah, one thing I can be very clear of, that at an aggregate level industry, the investors are going to lose money. Any technological related changes destroys the capital. It forces people to invest more. VW has just announced capex of 75 billion euro. GM has announced capex of $30 billion. So yeah, if free cash flows were to drive the valuation, we are in for a surprise. Secondly, terminal values are also at risk, because if you don't invest in the right technology or bet the right horse, you could have a Kodak moment coming to you in any future. And if any investors know, terminal value is the bulk of the value of the investment. So both the threat of obsolescence, inability to scale, and getting hurt by something which you are not aware of, all the risks remain. And it's a heady cocktail, and which investors are trying to navigate. It's a challenging environment as well as a difficult environment.
If I can add to that, Kuntal, I think the world is evolving very quickly, right? You had Tesla disrupt the market, and yet legacy counts in many ways, because in the end, the legacy companies have got their act together. Ford's 150 that President Biden drove is a phenomenal vehicle and is going to give Rivian a run for its money. And it came at the right time. The EQE launched by Mercedes-Benz is amazing. And again, it's going to give Tesla a run for its money. But, legacy's caught up. I wouldn't just discount the old economy. It took them some time to get their act together. But clearly, as they have gotten involved, you've seen even Tata has done the same. What they've done is realize culture is a problem, created a separate entity, which is the electric vehicle or hydrogen entity, and created a new culture so that they can move on. Leyland's done that. Ashok Leyland's done that with Switch. Tata has done that with his electrical vehicles. So you will see a very different approach from them. So I wouldn't discount investing in them. The other thing to watch is who's betting on what. So, for example, Mercedes is betting on electric, and Volkswagen's betting on electric. But BMW has got its leg in both boats. It's got electric, but it's also betting big on hydrogen. Toyota was only betting on hydrogen until recently, and then realized that it might be missing the boat, and therefore has also got involved with Suzuki on electric. So you've got to watch who's betting on what. Nikola's clearly hydrogen, Rivian's clearly electric. The founder of Tesla hates, Elon Musk hates hydrogen, clearly because he's put all his money on electric. So I think you've got to watch what these legacy companies are doing, and there's many investment opportunities that will come from that.
Ravin, I have something to add here. Whenever there's a new gold rush, the people who make shovels make maximum money. So I wouldn't bet on any of these heroes who are trying to kill each other. There are many safe players out there who are going to make it big, irrespective. People who do lightweighting of materials, who come up with new composites, who come up with new material which makes vehicle light. People who come up with sensors because we are moving digital, entertainment. The car today and the car of tomorrow is going to be more electrical and software driven compared to the cars of the last century. So there are enough low risk, high potential, high certainty players out there. And I think so from an investor, that's not a bad point. So I would rather bet on a material company, an electrolyte company, or a glass company, or a tire company. Certain things are not going to change. And my vote is on what's not going to change versus what's going to change at margin.
Yeah, just because my point was like, if you would have to pick apart the entire value chain, which segment has the potential to reward you as an investor? So not just the big companies and how they are behaving, but as you said, those who will focus on, making battery cheaper or making car engines more efficient. What would be your say on that particularly?
I'd say, divide your portfolio between a long-term and a short-term bet. I'm not teaching you, how to count 1 + 1 is 2, but that's the reality, because there are some long-term bets, which is what Kuntal's talking about, the ones who are creating the glass, the electrode, the tires, because those things never change. Yet there is some very high-risk opportunities, such as the early-stage financing of charge point operators, early-stage financing of companies that are working on various different battery chemistries to be able to fast charge or super fast charge. These bets might pay off in a very big way. So I would divide the portfolio and look at some early stage capital for extremely high risk but very innovative changes to the world and our mobility, and the bulk of your portfolio where Kuntal just said you should put it.
Yeah, so you could invest in a mineral ETF, you could invest in a recycling company, you could invest in material companies. The canvas is large, and I think so. There's a lot of opportunity across the world, I think so.
Right. So yeah, that was my set of questions, but I'm still super interested on a different level to know that, end of the webinar doesn't mean end of learning, and you guys are so eloquent in where you get your information from. So I would like to know, and also for all our listeners, what is your go-to source to stay on top of anything related to the EV market?
Ravin, would you answer?
Well, one of our go-to sources is obviously Needl.ai, because I think it does a great job, better than Google, for us to identify the critical information that we need on a daily basis. But we are also fortunate because of our podcast, Energizing India, and we get to speak on a weekly basis to regulators, to CEOs of car companies, to charge point operator founders, and there's nothing like getting it from the horse's mouth to get a real feeling and intuition of what the trend is going to be.
Yep. So using Needl, you can set up alerts and feeds which can bring you data from multiple blogs, website, print medias, social media, your chats, all kind of sources. You can configure it to suit your high priority source, and you can share with your colleagues. So it serves as a curating platform for knowledge, where high speed, velocity, high venue residing information can be streamlined and can be used by the Needl. I think so. My colleague here is showing one such feed which we have configured, where global EV news are being streamed in real time, and you can consume this in mobile going ahead soon, pretty soon. It's a good tool to curate content based on your context, as Ravin said.
Great. It is a great product, definitely. So, all right, this is the end. I want to thank all of you for being here with us. And I want to thank both Ravin and Kuntal for letting me pick your brains on this subject. And we try to cover all the important questions around the EV landscape. But if you have any further questions, please feel free to write to us at therightsIgnal@Needl.ai. And for those of you interested in listening to this recording again, today's conversation will be released on the Energizing India podcast by Ravin next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravin. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, Kuntal.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for including me. Great conversation.
Cheers.
Thank you.